Okay, so this one was x. Let's actually plug in some numbers. So we're going to write this in the example part. So you're going to have 3, let's try 3 to the 0 power. Okay, because a lot of times when people do this, they think, oh, because you can multiply by 0, it would be 0. But if you're not raising it to any power, it's going to be 1. The reason why is because when you're multiplying by something that's not there, you multiply by 1 to get the same thing. Okay, so if I did 100 to the 0 power, what's that going to be? So let's do it on our calculator then. Okay? Yep. So the answer to that is going to be 1. Okay, let's try a negative. Negative 5 to the 0. What's that going to be? Let's try it. If you guys need a calculator today, you can come up and trade me now if you haven't already, okay? So did you get negative 1 or positive 1? Yep. Okay, if it was negative 1, it would change it. And this even works with fractions. So if you have a fraction raised to the 0 power, still going to be 1. Okay, so that's a special rule that you're going to use throughout. And then, yeah. Okay, now I had you write down this rule. This is for negative exponents. Okay, so if you have a negative exponent, in order to make it positive, let's read what it says. So it says any number that's raised to a negative power is equal to 1 divided by that number and raised to the positive exponent. Okay? So this is going to be our example. Let's do 3 to the negative 2. So I'm going to explain the rule one more time. Anytime there's a negative exponent, what you're going to do is you're going to put it over 1. And then, can you guys make sure you're writing this down with me? Because I'm going to go slowly through this, and then I'm going to have you try some, okay? So if you have 3 to the negative 2, you put it over 1, and it's going to be 3 to the positive 2. Okay, so that's a special rule. Whenever you have a negative exponent, to make it positive, you put it over 1, and then whatever that exponent is becomes positive. Okay? Now, we did exponents at the very beginning of the year, so that was a while ago. Okay, well, sorry. Do you guys remember what 3 to the 2nd power is?
9.
Yep. So 3 to the 2nd power just means you're multiplying 3 by what? 3 by 3. So 3 to the 2nd power is 3 times 3. Let's remind ourselves how we put powers into the calculator. Do you guys remember what button that is? Yep. This is called the caret. This looks like a upward arrow. Oh, so if it's squared, you can press the x squared button and it will do to the 2nd power. Okay, that'll be the same thing as if you do 3 to the 2nd power like that. And then your answer would be 1 over 9. Alright, so I want you to try this one. So 2 to the negative 4. So I want you to write that as a fraction. And then we're going to use our calculator to... Okay, so So whenever you have a positive to a negative, it'll be 1 over the positive version. All right, so for A, Avery, what'd you get for that one?
For A?
Yep.
I got 1 over 64.
Great. All right, Stacy, what'd you get for B?
1.
Yep. So anytime you see something to the 0 power, it's just going to be 1. Okay? Now, this one is the same thing that we've done before, but if the negative is inside the parentheses, you have to keep it inside. Okay? So you have to keep the negative inside parentheses. Okay? Now, the reason why we're making a little note of that is that's usually the part that people forget. So if you forget to put the parentheses in your calculator, it's going to give you a different answer. Okay, so we're going to do so we're going to do -5 to the +4. So very similar to what we did last time. The only difference is now we have parentheses, okay? So we know the top is going to stay 1. Let's see what happens when we plug in the -5. So if you have -5 to the 4th power, will you guys plug it in on your calculator too? I want you to plug in both so you can see what's going to happen. And we're going to talk about why that happens. Okay? So remember, if you have -5 to the 4th power, what you're doing is you're multiplying -5 4 times. What happens when you multiply a negative by a negative? Yeah, it becomes a positive. So -5 times -5 is what? Positive. What's 5 times 5? 25. So this would be like 25 times 25. And that's how we get positive 625. Okay, so that's what your calculator is doing when you keep it inside the parentheses. Okay, when the negative is outside, you are going to keep the negative outside. So we're just going to drop that down, okay? Now, the 5 to the -4, we're going to rewrite that as 1 over 5 to the 4th. Okay, now we already found what -5 to the 4th is. If we do 5 to the 4th, we get the same thing, but we keep the negative in front. Okay, so if the negative is in front or outside the parentheses, it stays there. You can say outside or just in front, whichever is going to make the most sense to you. Okay? All right, now let's plug in -5 to the 4th. If we do that, we get that -625, okay, which is why this is going to stay negative. Uh-huh.
I thought another way to do it was just a calculator.
Okay, yeah.
So what I did for most of these, which I think I got the right answer,
Yep.
was put the, so for example, the in parentheses -5 to the power of -4,
Mhm.
put that in, and hold on, put it in, and then it's a decimal, but if you do the fraction to decimal, it will be the answer.
Oh, okay, good. That's a great way to check. I really do want you to understand how these are going to be written, because after we do this with numbers, we're going to do it with variables, and you won't be able to plug those in. But yes, you can. And another good way to check, like if this was on a multiple choice test that you had to take, and you could check your answers. What Avery's saying is, if you do this right, you get a decimal, and you could also just divide this, right? So it's 0.0016. So if you do 1 divided by 625, you should get the same decimal, right? And then you have the fraction key that just changes it into a fraction for you. Yeah. Yep. Great. All right. And then the next thing we're going to do is, again, something that we did at the beginning of the year. Okay. So when you're evaluating an expression, what that means is that you're going to be plugging in values. So A says x to the negative 2 for x equals 4. So let's box in, or I made a nice little cloud, for what we're going to plug in. Okay, so I know you guys are really good at the plugging in steps, because we had to do that in the last section where we were checking. And then if you have x to the negative 2, you're just going to plug in 4 to the negative 2. Okay, so anytime you have a negative, what's our rule? What's the new rule we learned today? If you have a negative, what am I going to have to write? What do you think? Yeah, 1 over? Yes, great. 1 over 4 to the second. Do you guys know what 4 squared is, or 4 times 4? Yep. Nice. Okay, now B looks a little trickier. So there's 3 different parts to this. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just box in what I have. I have A equals 5. I have B equals negative 3. Okay? And then this is negative 2, A to the 0, B to the negative 4. So I just rewrote that, so I know what I'm working with. Okay, there's nothing to plug in for negative 2, so that's going to stay. And then if I have A to the 0, what am I plugging in for A here? 5. Okay, and then Erica, what am I going to plug in for B? Negative 3. Yep, so I have negative 3 to the negative 4. Okay, what we're going to do is we're just going to do each one of these separately. So there's nothing else I have to do with the negative 2. I'm going to keep that. And then, Ryan, do you remember the rule, if I raise something to the 0 power, what's that going to be every time? If I raise something to the 0 power? Do you remember? Or do you need some help? Help?
I do.
Do that. Good. Do you remember how to do something to the 0 power?
0 power?
Yeah? No? Okay. Keith, you want to help us? I know. But he wasn't paying attention. Yeah, so what is it? 1. Yep. Okay. So 5 to the 0 is just going to be 1. Okay. So remember that no matter what your number is, it's just going to be 1. Anything to the 0 power will be 1. Okay. Now for this one, it's going to be 1 over. I know it's going to be 1 over because of the negative exponent. Okay. So if you have that, we're just going to change it to a fraction, and that allows us to make the exponent positive. Okay, so if you're not sure about that, write it down with me so you have a good example for your practice. And then what we're going to do is we're going to multiply across. So what we have to remember is something else from the beginning of the year. Do you guys remember how to multiply fractions? If you're multiplying fractions, what do? Oh, we did do that. That's if they're equal. I heard somebody say straight across. Yep. So let's put those over 1. We're just going to multiply straight across. Okay, so what's a negative 2 times 1 times 1? Some of you could probably do that without your calculator, right? What's negative 2 times 1? Negative 2. Negative 2 times 1? Negative 2. Okay, now this one, we can, do you know how to do it without your calculator?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry. That's what I thought you were saying is easy, but yes. So all you have to do is negative 3 to the 4th, you should get 81. I think that people are usually really good at their multiplication facts when they're the same number. So remember, if you have negative 3 times negative 3, what's that going to be? What's negative 3 times negative 3?
9.
Yep. So if you have something 4 times, all you have to do is multiply 9 times 9. Is that one of your multiplication facts that you guys remember? For some reason, I always remembered that one. That's why the bottom is 81. Okay.
The way I did it wasn't.
Wait till we're done with the notes, okay?
The way I did it wasn't. I didn't keep that. I calculated that first, then put it in another thing, and I did get 81.
Yep, and then anytime you have a negative, I want you to make sure that you have your fraction here.
I added that, but I'm still.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Yep, that's fine. Okay, so remember I said we're going to apply these rules to different variables. Okay? So whenever you have a negative, okay, this is 7 times w to the negative 4. Okay, so let's get that written down. Okay, so if you have anything to the negative power, okay, it's always 1 over that value. Give it a second. Okay, so once you have that over it, okay, so once you have that over it, you're just going to multiply by 7, and again, you're just multiplying fractions. So if you're multiplying fractions, I found that it's easier if you think of it as over 1 if it's a whole number, because that's what you guys have done before. Okay, so 7 times 1 is 7. 1 times w to the 4th. This is going to be your final answer. Okay, so again, if you have a negative, you put it over 1. If you have to multiply, you can make it a fraction and multiply straight across. And then you can, actually, Dave, I need to check in your worksheet, so if you want to put your packet here. All right, and then this is going to be something special. It's going to be the reverse of what we've done before, okay? So this is the first time we've seen this, where you have a negative. Okay, if there's a negative in the denominator, we're not going to make it into a fraction over 1 because it's already on the bottom. Okay, so what we have to do is move it to the top. So we're going to make ourselves a little note. Okay, so this is going to happen sometimes, so we're going to make ourselves a little note about what to do. So if there's a negative exponent in the denominator, okay, we're going to move it to the top. Okay, so if there's a negative exponent in the denominator, we're going to move it to the top. And we're going to make the exponent positive. So we're still making it positive. It's just, if it's in the denominator, we have to move it to the numerator. Okay, so if it's in the bottom, we have to move it to the top. If it's on the top, we have to move it to the bottom. Okay? All right, so if I move this to the top, it becomes negative 5 times k to the second. Okay, so we have to move that to the top, and your final answer would be this. Now those are going to feel kind of tricky at first, so that's how we're going to practice them. Okay, and then for part C, with our exponents, there's going to be 2 rules. So Gabe, just jump in with us on the bottom, okay? So here are your exponent rules. Okay, the exponents are either positive or negative. Okay, we like it when things are positive. So if it's positive, it stays. If it's positive, it stays. If it's negative, you move and you make it positive. Okay, so these are the 2 types of exponents that you're going to encounter. You're either going to have a positive exponent that's going to stay, a negative that's going to move, okay, and then you still have to look out for your special cases. All right, so we're going to do this step by step. What I want you to do is I want you to write an equal sign, and then I want you to make your fraction bar, and we're just going to do these one by one. So the first one we're going to look at is a to the 0. Anything to the 0 power is what? What's anything to the 0 power? Yep. So if a to the 0 is 1, I'm just going to put 1 on the top. Okay, and then the next one we're going to look at is b to the negative 2. So the exponent is negative, so I have to move it and make it positive. So if it's on the top, I'm going to move it to the bottom and make it positive. Okay, any questions about these 2 right here? Because now we're going to move to the bottom. Okay, so I have c to the negative 3. Again, it's a negative exponent, so I'm going to move it. It's on the bottom. I'm going to move it to the top. And then the last one is positive. So if it's positive, it stays. Okay, and that's your final answer. Now, when you check your final answer, if there's just a 1 on top, 1 times anything is itself. So just like with the numbers in front of x and how we don't see the 1, that would be the same thing here. Okay, and then we're going to do one more together and then I'll let you practice, okay? All right, now for D, we're going to start the same way where we're just going to make our fraction bar, okay? And we're going to go one by one. Except the first thing I have is 2. Does 2 have an exponent on it? If I cover up this, you can just see the 2, right? Does 2 have an exponent? No. The A has an exponent, but the 2 doesn't. So that's a special rule. If you have a number without an exponent, then it's going to stay. Okay, and now you know all the rules of this. So if you have a number, it doesn't have an exponent, it's going to stay where it is. So 2 is going to stay on top. Okay, and then the next one is A. So A is to a negative. If it's negative, does it stay or does it go? It's going to go. Okay, so you have to move it and make it positive. So this would be A to the first. And then your B value, B to the negative 4th, is going to be B to the positive 4 because it's negative, so we have to move it. Okay, and then what about C squared? Is that going to stay or is that going to go? Stay. Good. Okay, so it's going to be 2 over. Now, what's anything to the first power? Itself, right? Yeah, because if you just have A to the first, you only have one A. So just like before, you can just keep it as A. Okay, I would not mark it wrong if you kept the first power, but when we're checking our answers, it's going to look like this. Okay? Hold on one second. And then we're going to do the alphabetical order. Okay, so your variables, see how they're in ABC order? Okay, that's how your answers are going to be given for that. Okay?